The shop simulator / dungeon crawling genre has always been something that I wish more games would explore, at least ever since I played Recettear, another title that introduced me to that peculiar type of game. It also happens to be one of the main inspirations for Moonlighter, a 2018 game developed by Digital Sun and published by 11-Bit Studios. The story of Moonlighter takes place in Rhinoka, a village situated near an excavation site. You play as a young man named Will who runs his own item shop, but he's no ordinary shopkeeper. He frequents the dungeons, searching for loot and satisfying his thirst for adventure. Standing around and waiting for people to buy something from your shop might sound boring, but it's surprisingly fun, especially when you start exploiting customers by selling everything higher than base price. There are quite a few things to consider when you're busy shopkeeping, like the popularity of an item and the customer's reactions when they see it. So adjusting the price of an item requires a bit of calculation, finding a sweet spot that's not too cheap or expensive. More mechanics are added as well with every shop upgrade. Like store decorations contain perks that increase the number of customers you get and the amount of tips they give. You'll also have villagers requesting for materials in exchange for gold. Oh, and you'll have to look out for thieves because they'll eventually stop by and... With dungeons, Moonlighter doesn't do any hand-holding. The tutorial makes sure that you know that. A decent amount of surprises are hiding in the dungeons. Like, I only found out about a secret room when I accidentally fell down in one area. The layout is never the same when you enter any of the dungeons more than once. You'll also lose most of the hard-earned items in your bag if you get knocked out in the dungeon. Yeah, you never actually die in the game. You can choose to try again, or get spit out of the dungeon gate. Common enemies have predictable attack patterns, and they're easy to take care of with better equipment. It was actually the same thing for bosses. I found that every time I was stuck with a boss, all I needed to do was focus on getting enough gold and materials to upgrade my equipment. Because of that, the game felt grindy and repetitive from time to time. Certain materials were exclusive to a dungeon too, so you could only get better weapons and armor if you've gotten the necessary stuff from the latest dungeon you've unlocked. Loot would always be more valuable in the newer dungeons as well, so you won't make any progress by going back to the older ones. As nice as it would be to get greedy and grab everything you find, Will's backpack has limited space, making inventory management necessary if you want to maximize your profit. It gets tricky because certain items will have curses applied to them, like one material can only be placed at the side of the bag, and another item might destroy something that's close to it, but not all of the curses are curses. Some of the conditions would do positive things like send an item back home. The gameplay loop of tending the shop and exploring dungeons day by day was quite relaxing. Days go by with the in-game calendar, but there are no deadlines for the main story. The only time you'll be paying attention to that is when you're doing optional stuff like item requests, but even then you won't get a penalty if you fail to do them, so there's no pressure at all. There's a small assortment of weapons to suit your playstyle, from swords, bows, to gloves. I personally liked using the sword and shield as my main, and the bow for my secondary. Honestly, I don't even know why I didn't go through the game with the big sword because I barely used my shield. But anyway, things never get too hardcore in fights, despite the recommended difficulty of the game being hard. It doesn't matter what level of the dungeon you're in. Your progress is reset if you choose to teleport back home. Thankfully, it doesn't take long for the game to give you a teleportation spell that acts like a checkpoint, at the cost of spending more gold. I found it useful in the later dungeons, especially when I wanted to go back to the village, set up shop, and stock up on potions. Maybe even sleep in for a few days just because I can, before finally stepping into the portal and into the boss room. What disappointed me about the game is Rhinoka Village. You can only get a handful of people to set up shop, like a blacksmith and the potion brewing witch. Other than that, the village doesn't offer much to see or interact with. It felt livelier at least with each dungeon that I completed, despite a lot of the villagers repeating each other's dialogue. It would have been nice to sneak around in people's houses, or have a deeper relationship with certain NPCs. I think the closest relationship Will has is with this old man who keeps nagging him to stay home even though he already completed like 3 dungeons. And speaking about the dungeons, they got tiring by the time I started the 3rd one. It wasn't too thrilling to grind through similar looking rooms and enemies that aren't too different. It's too bad because the entire game has such a pleasing art style. It made me feel right at home in Rhinoka, but the dungeon's aesthetics quickly wore off. Moonlighter has its flaws, but I had a lot of fun. It's not bad for an indie studio's first title. I took my time and clocked in about 18 hours, grinding for materials and making bank. The game scratched an itch that I've had after Reciteer. Not completely, of course, because Moonlighter is its own game. And thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought about the video. I'm pretty sure I've been keeping an eye on Moonlighter way back when it was still a Kickstarter project, but life went on and I only remembered about it now. Better late than never, I guess. Especially since there's been a lot of updates since it first released. So I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.